Hi, this is Denise Matthew, and today I'm going to do a few subscriber charts. It's something new I'm going to do, and if you want to have your chart looked at, you can send me your details at denise.matthew@yahoo.com, and that's your birth date, time, and also the place of your birth. I'll probably be able to do one or two a month, and I'll just randomly pick from the charts that come in. Because I want to keep the details of each person secret, I'm just going to talk about the birthday so that the person whose chart it is, they will know it. So the chart I'm going to do today is from September 1st, 1985. Whenever you read a chart, it's best to go from a broad perspective and then move in a little bit closer as you go along. So what that means is that you would go from the type, then the profile, and then you would start to look at the centers, and then the last thing you would look at would be the gates and channels. That's not the only way to do it, but that's the way I like to do it. So when we look at this chart, we see that person is a projector type, and I have a whole video on projector types for more information, but basically projector types are here to guide and direct generator types. They're like the sages of the human design system, but sages that only work well when they're asked for the information or recognized for their information or talents. And when they're recognized, then they can have the information received in the best possible way. And how we know this person is projector is not just because it's written on the chart. It also shows up in that the person has an open sacral, but they also don't have a motor to the throat. There are a lot of half channels coming from the throat, but none that actually completely make it down to one of the motors, which are the will, the solar plexus, the root, and also the sacral. If we start with the open centers, you can notice that this person has an open spleen. So when we're talking about an undefined spleen, that is somebody who can actually be a medical intuitive or somebody who can feel the energy of people's wellness or health based on the energy that the person is giving off. And what that means is that when this person is out in the world, they might have this feeling that they're not feeling well, or they're getting some kind of a flu or cold, or just not feeling well in general. But sometimes this can be the energy of other people around them. And so when they get out of the aura of other people, they might realize that actually they weren't sick. It was the aura of other people. So that's what they need to do. When you have an open spleen, you need to make sure it's your energy, not other people's energy around you. And the theory is that the more open your chart is, the more energy you're going to feel from those around you. Another thing about the spleen that's open is there could be a timing issue, and that usually means that somebody could be really early for things or alternatively late for a lot of things. Because when you have an open spleen, timing can be more fluid for you. And one more thing about having an open spleen is that you may have a lot of flus, a lot of colds, a lot of illnesses, or you may not have any at all. Everybody's different. And we can also see that there's an open sacral, which we already talked about, and that means this person's a projector because, again, no motorized throat. And then if we look at the root that is just below the sacral, that talks about adrenaline energy. And when you have an open root, it's considered what's called a pressure center. There are two pressure centers in the human design system, and those two pressure centers are the head center and also the root center. So this person has both pressure centers undefined. When you have a root center that's undefined, it means that you may be always in a rush to get things done. As soon as you get some sort of a task that you want to do, you want to get it done immediately. Or the opposite would be that you like to have that rush of energy, of anxiety that you get because you haven't completed a task. So you might leave it to the last minute. These people can be adrenaline junkies. They might like caffeine, chocolate, or anything that gives them a jolt. And people who have this energy are always going on lists of things they have to do. And usually the list is always replaced by a new list as soon as one's done. And the whole thing about these pressure centers is to really ask yourself, what's going to happen if I don't do this right away? So that's how you deal with this energy. And one key thing with all open centers is that the energy is more fluid, it's more inconsistent, and it can come in a different way for different people based on who you're with, and also can be related to the gates that actually go into those centers. And like I said, the open head center is a pressure center as well, and that's usually about figuring things out and doing a lot of thinking. And this is a person who could go on an internet search for something that they're thinking about, and then before they know it, they're completely off in a different area. They don't even know how they actually got there. And when you have an open head center, you're inspired a lot and you're always trying to figure things out. And the biggest question here is to ask yourself, is this my problem to solve or is it somebody else's? So a lot of times people with open head centers have to really discern what's theirs and what's not theirs and what's important for them to finish and what's not important for them to finish. And if they do this, the pressure will be less. And then if you go just below the head center, we have the ajna. And the ajna is all about fixed beliefs or not fixed beliefs. Now, when you have a defined ajna, you can have more fixed beliefs. This, I always say that anybody who has a defined ajna is more able to have a belief that they can hold on to. And this can come in the form of organized religions or just beliefs on certain things that are quite inflexible. But when you have an open ajna, you can have more of a fluidity here again. So your beliefs can be changed based on other people around you, and you have more of an open idea of how things are in the world. And because of this, you probably can see the perspective of other people rather than just seeing your own perspective. When this center is open, the need to be certain about things may be really strong, but because of the nature of the fluidity and the way the energy flows through this, it's really impossible to really feel certain about anything. And so holding on to that belief that you need to always be certain about something is probably counterintuitive, and just letting things go and letting things flow as they are and just accepting it as it is usually a helpful way to be when you have an open ajna. Now, if we go into the defined centers, we can see that we have a defined throat. And some people automatically think that because there is a defined throat, that means it's a motorized throat. But just because it's brown doesn't mean that it's motorized, because it can be defined through the channels that lead from the G center or the identity center, the yellow diamond in the center. And also it can be defined from the ajna, because as soon as there's a complete channel between two centers, that will define the two centers. This person has a defined identity or a defined G center, and it's defined through the 1020, and that's defined from the G center right to the throat. And when that's defined from the G center to the throat, that usually means that somebody is very sensitive to criticism, because the theory is that this person speaks from their soul. The identity is thought to carry the soul of an individual. Some people call this the turtle syndrome, or somebody who, once they've sort of stuck their head out and said their piece or said something, and if they get criticized, they may crawl back in their shell and not really want to come back out because they've been hurt too much. Someone with a defined identity may be more certain about who they are and also the direction in life. And it may be easier from an early age to decide their career path or what they want to do with their lives. And when you have a defined throat that isn't motorized, this is just a specific way of the way you interact or the way you speak to people. And the gates that are attached to the throat are the gates that you talk about. We'll go through the gates a little bit later. And this person also has a defined will. Only 1/8 of the population have a defined will. So this is something that's a little bit more rare to have. And when you have a defined will, it means that people feel empowered by you. It also means that if you went for a job interview and somebody without a defined will went for a job interview, you might have an upper edge, because it's just this feeling that you know what you're talking about. And it's less about what you say and more about the energy that you give off with a defined will. And the defined will is considered a motor that is said to be work to rest. So in other words, you can work a lot. You can go beyond the capabilities of other people who don't have a defined will, because you can push yourself beyond your limitations. But the problem with this energy is that if you do continue to push yourself beyond your limitations and you don't take a break, then you can have what's called a universal break, which means that you might get sick or something might happen in your life that actually pulls you out of the game. So it's really important for somebody with a defined will to actually pull back after they've done the work and take that rest, because if they don't, the rest will be made for them. And especially if you're a projector, because your energy of your sacral energy is inconsistent, it could mean that you could actually burn yourself out by just going over and above what you can actually do. Because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it. And lastly, this person has a defined emotional center, and that means that they have an emotional wave. I have mentioned that in the videos of the types, so if you want to check back on one of those videos, it will talk about the emotional wave. I do plan on putting out videos on the emotional center soon, and all the centers actually. This person is defined through the 4037, which is a tribal emotional wave, and that can be related to family relationships and also just relationships in general. The theory is to make any big decisions in your life, it's better to wait for your emotional wave to pass so that you'll know exactly if it's right for you. Otherwise, you could be jumping into something that's not actually right for you. If we move on to the profile, we can see this person is a 4-6 profile. And what that means is that they have the conscious 4, which is all about foundations, networking, and also it's a fixed energy, which means someone who carries this energy doesn't like to be criticized. They like to be taken for who they are and accepted for who they are. And anybody who likes to change them will be someone who they're not very happy with. Somebody who carries a 4 energy is somebody who needs to have a friendship before they get romantically involved with somebody, because if they do, then their relationship will probably do better. And usually all the opportunities that a person with a 4 energy get is from their network of people. They may know people in every place they go. And usually people with a 4 energy always want a new opportunity before they give up an old opportunity. The 6th side of the 4-6 profile is the role model part, and that's an unconscious part. But usually when you get older, you're more conscious about it. 6 energy comes in a 3-phase cycle, which is 0 to 28. That's usually considered your experimental phase. And then 28 to 50 is what's considered your roof stage, or that's when you go and after you've experimented and everything, you're deciding what worked, what didn't work, and you're kind of integrating what you learned as you are sort of pulled away from other people. And this may be a tough energy for somebody who carries a 4 energy, because someone who carries a 4 energy is all about networking and being out with people. Although there is that push and pull. Somebody with a 4 energy likes to network, but they need to have some downtime to relax as well. So when they're on the roof, they might have this feeling that they want to go out and they want to network, but then this other aspect of the role model wants to just hang out and not go anywhere. Again, this usually happens after the age of 28, but again, that number is not fixed. I mean, it changes for everybody. Everybody has a different way of expressing the energy of the role model. After the age of 50, or after a person has achieved their role model status, this is a person who is going to be a role model just by being who they are. It's less about trying to actively teach or be a role model for people. It's just about just hanging out and just being yourself. And when you're being yourself, then you're sharing who you are with other people. And that's exactly what a role model is supposed to do. So now if we go into the incarnation cross, we see that this person is the right angle cross of planning. All right angle crosses are considered people who are here to have an interpersonal experience. And that means they're here to discover more about themselves through relationships and how they interact in the world. So really, it's a journey of self-discovery when you have a right angle cross. The right angle cross is made up of the conscious sun and conscious earth, and unconscious sun and unconscious earth. So if you look at the conscious sun, which is 40, that talks about somebody who likes to be alone in their own space. And in fact, somebody who carries this energy may feel as if they are a bit of a hermit. Because this cross has the channel 4037 in it, it means that this person is somebody who needs to have bargains and agreements that are made to be honored. Somebody breaks a deal or goes back on their word, this can be really hard for the person who carries this energy, especially if it's in the marriage contract. If somebody, for instance, breaks their contract or cheats in the marriage, this could be very devastating for anybody who carries this energy. And the one thing about this energy that can sometimes cause issues is when somebody is making agreements, but a lot of times somebody who carries a 4037 may be making agreements in their head, and they may have actually felt they articulated it to the other person, but in fact they haven't. And so the other person doesn't really know that they are expecting a certain thing to happen and it doesn't happen, and so there's a disappointment. So anyone who carries this energy really needs to make sure that they're very clear and upfront about all the agreements and what they're hoping and expecting from people. So if we look at the other side, the unconscious or the design part of the top 4 incarnation cross numbers, we see the 16 and also the 9. Now the 16 is all about enthusiasm. There's a lot of excitement and energy when you're sharing information. I sometimes consider this a sales energy, but this is a sales energy that really is only about selling things that you truly believe in. And this enthusiasm for sales or just for sharing of ideas is extremely infectious, where other people will get excited with this person when they're sharing their ideas and their enthusiasm. Just below the 16, we have the 9. This is really about focus and sometimes even obsession with ideas and finding out everything they can about it. Because there isn't the 48 or the depth, this energy could be about somebody who buys a lot of books but may not necessarily read them all, because they've already moved on to a different topic. And just as expected, the right angle cross of planning is all about planning. This is about who gets the resources and allocating and managing resources, doing deals that are in the best interest of everybody. And because it's attached to the will center, it is always about resources, and money management. So somebody who carries this energy can be involved in some sort of business ventures, especially when it's high up in the incarnation cross like it is in this chart. Because this is just an example chart, I'm not going to go through all the different gates, but I will pull out a few more that will give some more information on the chart. Now, the next thing after the incarnation cross is what's really important is the moon. And if you see in the moon, we have the 43 and also the 17. The 43 energy is sort of an energy that is someone who is before their time. So this is a person who can have very unusual and mutative ideas. And when we talk about mutative ideas, these are ideas or different ways of thinking. So for instance, when we talk about the 43, we'll talk about someone like Steve Jobs who had this idea about something that was very innovative and very unusual. And when people first listened to what he had to say, they thought he was probably a little crazy. But the thing about the 43 and also the 23 is that there's a timing component to these innovative ideas. And so if the timing isn't correct, a person who carries this energy can be shut down. But if the timing is right and the information is asked for, somebody who carries this energy can have some really innovative ideas and really be the inventors or the people who make changes happen in the world. And it's in the fourth line, which means it's a foundational energy, which is a foundation of mutative ideas and innovative ideas. And if you look at the conscious moon, that's in the 17, and the 17 is all about opinions. And these opinions are usually about how to better things. But generally, the key words with this is that if the opinions aren't asked for, it's better to wait. Because if the timing isn't right and somebody is actually giving opinions on how to do things better, the other person who's receiving the information may take it in a negative way. But if the person who's receiving the information is asking for it or it's the right timing, then usually it's taken in a more positive way. And some people who carry this energy can be called opinionated. We already talked about the 3740 channel, and the other channel that this person has is the 2010. This channel is considered the channel of the Buddha or also the channel of the verbal gunslinger, which basically means that this person can empower people or, on the other hand, can disempower them. And that's all done with their words. These are people who can literally rip a strip off other people with their words alone. But in its highest form, these are people who can make other people feel extremely good about who they are. Because the gate 10 is defined as well, that means that this person can be blamed for things or this person can blame other people for things that happen. The gate 10 is all about self-love, or on the opposite side, it can be narcissism, or it can also be somebody who's always putting other people ahead of them. The highest expression, of course, is the self-love. When somebody who carries the gate 10 loves themselves, then they can actually share that positive energy and empowerment with others. 20 is all about charisma. So this is a person who can be very charismatic if they want. Based on their chart, this is a person who could definitely do well in sales, and they could also do well in counseling. And for sure, they could be a marriage counselor if they wanted to be. This is a person who is not really an initiator or somebody who can start something up as easily as they can close something. They have the gate of the closer, which means that's somebody who comes in and finishes projects once they're already started. So these are great people who can do project managing or something like that because of the defined will and also some indicators of money management. Money management definitely can be something they do. From a mystical perspective, this is a person who could be connected to the angelic realm or the realms of other worlds that we don't see. But because they have half of the channel of doubt and suspicion, there might be some critical thinking about what exactly exists beyond our reality. And if we look at the Saturn, which is where we learn our biggest lessons, and if we get our Saturn completed and we learn the lessons there, we can usually go to our Jupiter, which is what our rewards are. So for the Saturn here, we see that it's a 43. And again, that's mutative, innovative ideas. And again, that's all about correct timing. And if we imagine that Saturn is a planet that throws everything into the fire and only the gold is what's left over, then that's exactly what would happen. This would be somewhere where a person with the 43 energy can get tripped up quite a bit when they're trying to share their innovative ideas and the timing is not correct. And again, when they're asked for these innovative ideas, that's usually when the magic happens. And the rewards that they get through their Jupiter are the 13 and also the 19. The 19 is all about being sensitive or to express your sensitivity. And the 13 is all about being the listener. So listening to other people's problems and can be a very good counseling energy. So that's all I have to say about this chart. Of course, we could go on for hours and talk about every chart because there is so much information and detail in them. So let's move on to the next chart. So this person was born July 14th, 1999. They're a projector type. And the profile is different as well as the incarnation cross. So we definitely can get into that kind of information. So let's go through the chart. So this person also has a undefined head and ajna, which we talked about. So that's open to inspiration, undefined head, and also a person who has more fluidity in their beliefs. They also have an open spleen, which is interesting, and they also have a open sacral because they're a projector with a defined throat, but no motorized throat. What is different is that they have an open will, and when somebody has an open will, that can be somebody who doesn't value who they are as much as they should. This could be somebody who undercharges for services they do, and somebody who's not as money focused as other people are. Somebody with a defined will is more likely to be concerned about money and what they have and the resources that they have. Now, that's not always the case, but it can be the case. And this will center only has one gate off it, so we'll talk about that a little bit later, because what that means is all the energy for that particular center is funneled through that one gate. Now, if we look at the defined centers, we have the defined throat, as the other one had, and also defined G center, and there is a connection between the two. It's a different connection, but it is definitely a connection. We also have an emotional wave person, but the emotional wave is through the 1949, so that's different as well, and also they have a defined root. So when you have an emotional wave through the 1949, this is really related to marriage or relationships. And this is also about somebody who can be quite sensitive. Just like the 4037, the 4919 is also a tribal energy. People who carry this energy, when they find their partner, it's almost like they're so familiar with each other that they generally don't want to go out and be with other people. And other people might consider that unusual, but for someone who carries this energy, it's completely normal. And these people are almost made to be married or in a committed relationship of some kind. And similar to the 4037, somebody who has their relationship contract broken, if somebody cheats on them or if their partner passes away, these people will really feel it deeply and it can be really difficult for them to cope with, even more difficult than a lot of other people. So really the 4037 and also the 1949 can have issues with this. But the interesting thing about the 1949 is if they decide to end the relationship, then usually it's just done and they just like walk out and there's no looking back, which is a very 49 or revolutionary energy. This person also has a defined root. And when you have a defined root, that means that you have pulses of energy to get work done. And when your pulse is off, it may be difficult to get your mojo on to get work done, even if you have a timeline. And because the root is defined through a connection with the emotional center, this root energy and pulse can be really related to the emotional wave and how the person is feeling. So if a person was having a lot of trouble with a relationship or feeling really unhappy in a relationship, they may feel that they really just can't get anything done and they have no urge to do anything. They also have a fixed identity, which is again being more certain of who you are and knowing from a younger age about who you are. Having a fixed identity doesn't necessarily mean you have everything figured out, but there could be this idea that you have a little more clarity of what you want to do with your life. And somebody with an open identity likes to do a lot of different things. In fact, they may feel like they're missing out on something if they give up some part of some of the things that they like to do. And because of this, they may feel more uncertain in where their path is in life. So this person has a 2-4 profile. The 2 is all about being a hermit, and the 4 is, as we talked about just a few minutes ago, the networker. So a lot of people who have a 4 energy are people who have a fixed energy who don't want people to change who they are. And while unconditional love is important to many of us, the 2-4 or somebody with a 4 in their profile really feels that this is an important part of anybody who they're interacting with. Somebody who carries this profile is a conscious hermit because the 2 is in the conscious area. So that means that they know that they like to be alone. In fact, somebody with a 2 energy is somebody who actually needs to have the time alone to recharge, because if they don't, they feel very depleted and even get to the point of being burnt out. The 4 energy is about networking and getting out with friends, but they also have that component of their personality. They like to be alone so they can recharge as well. So what can happen is there could be a little bit too much hermiting in this, because what happens with the two is very happy to be alone for as long as they like, but the four energy will get lonely eventually when they're being alone, so they need to get back out. So there can be a push and pull. But the benefit to having the two energy is the two energy is about being called out to do something. So the two energy is called out into an opportunity, because the four line is all about opportunity or being an opportunist. And this can be a perfect profile for somebody who is a projector, because a projector can be invited out into opportunities. And because of the hermiting nature of their personality, they're happy to sort of be away from people and not necessarily out in the fray of everybody. There can be many different definitions of what Maya means, but for this incarnation cross, when we talk about Maya, we're talking about the real world and the concept of the separation between the spiritual and also the material world. So if we look at the gates of the Maya, we can see that in the conscious sun, there's the 62, and the conscious earth, the 61, and the unconscious sun is the 42, and the unconscious earth is the 32. So what is the 62? Well, the 62 is all about practicality. And then if you look at the 61 is a very mystical gate, which talks about searching to know the unknowable. So this is like an interest. It could be interest in the esoteric arts or anything about the occult or anything that's beyond the veil or beyond our reality. But the really interesting thing about this combination is you have somebody who is practically trying to introduce the concepts of the occult or the unknowable into the Maya, which is the real world. So there is a connection between the spiritual world and the material world. So this is not somebody who would just have spiritual practices just because. There would have to be some reason for doing these spiritual practices or some practical application for the practices. Now, if we look at the unconscious sun and the unconscious earth, we see in the unconscious sun, we have the 42. The 42 is the gate of the closer. Now, this is a person who could have some issues with initiating projects, but certainly can come in and close anything that's already been started. Now, we've already looked at this gate, so I'm not going to get too far into it. But then below the 42, we have the 32. Now, the 32 is all about big ambitions, big ideas. Because it's considered one of the fear gates, there can be a fear that your big ambitions or big ideas may not necessarily happen the way you want them to. So then if we look back at the conscious sun and we imagine that everything is pushed through the conscious sun, because that's how incarnation crosses are supposed to work, we could have somebody with big ideas about the occult, about what we don't see in our own reality, about the spiritual world, that are delivered in a practical way. And these ideas are not something that is initiated by the person. They're basically ideas that have already been out there. So there could be a spiritual practice that this person aligns with, and because they feel that it is practical or there is some value in sharing this information, they can bring it out into the real world. So we can imagine somebody who's grounded in reality, but also very interested in spirituality and how they can use it to improve their life. And if we look at the moon that's just below the 4 incarnation cross numbers, we see that there is the 33 in the moon and also the 36 in the moon. So if we look at the gate 33, we could see somebody who is possibly interested in history or stories of the past. This gate is another gate that's considered an alone gate, or somebody who likes to be left alone. So a person who has all this energy in their chart probably likes to a lot of alone time or downtime to be away from people. But having said that, they still need that 4, which is all about networking and getting their opportunities from the people that they know. In the most positive light, this energy can be somebody who learns the stories of the past and deciphers what we can learn from it in the future and also the present, so that we can learn from the past. But the shadow side of it can be somebody who's stuck in the past and doesn't want to move forward. And this also could be somebody who is gifted in storytelling. Now, if we look at the 36, that's a gate of boredom. And this is always about finding new thrills all the time and the next new thing. Can be a person who jumps from one thing to the next really quick before they really master one thing. It can also be the sense that there's always going to be something better out there than what they have in front of them. And to be happiest in their work, this person needs some level of variety. Otherwise, they can be frustrated or bored with what they're doing. And whatever's in our moon is all about what drives us. So when we're talking about what drives this person, it could be they're driven to find the next new thing and variety in their life. And also they're driven to find out about the stories of the past and how things were done in the past, even sacred stories. I already talked about having an open spleen and what that can mean for somebody who has an open spleen, but what I haven't talked about were the gates that come off the spleen. And all the gates off the spleen are considered the fear gates. And this kind of fear is more of a primal fear than it is anything else. And this fear is usually something that's not really something that they need to be scared of. And if they push through the fears, they can usually get over it. Now, that's not the same for all parts of the chart, because there is other parts where we get anxiety and nervousness. But in this specific part of the chart, anything coming through the spleen is always about something that we can push through. And when we do, we usually realize that it wasn't as bad as we expected. So I already touched on the gate 32 and how that's all about worrying that your big dreams will never come into being. Now, if we look at the gate 28, this person has a gate 28 as well, which is another fear gate. And the thing about the gate 28, it's all about struggling in things that we do, struggling in life. But sometimes the question here with somebody that with the gate 28 is, are the struggles worthwhile? Because ultimately the energy of the 28 is all about fighting the good fight or struggling to get the things that are worthwhile in life. Somebody who carries this energy can oftentimes struggle even more than they need to. In other words, they will struggle for everything in their life rather than just allowing some things to be easy. This can be a person who picks the hardest project to do, or the most difficult instrument to learn, or a very difficult career path, something that really challenges them. There can be stubbornness in this energy as well. And also, the one thing that anybody with this energy who carries it usually says is that as soon as someone tells them they can't do something, that's exactly when they want to show that person exactly why they can do it. The gate 44 is the last of the fear gates, and it has a couple different connotations to it. The gate 44 can also be somebody who's really good in sales, and they're the people that make things look really nice so that the sale goes through. Or the people that decorate a store so that it looks appealing, so when people come in, they want to buy something. And if we're talking about the 44 as a fear gate, the 44 is all about an anxiety about looking at the past and believing that it might repeat itself. So if something bad has happened to this person in the past, there could be an anxiety that that same thing is going to happen again. But this is not necessarily true. This is probably just a fear that can lodge within them, and that if they try really hard to push through it and not really believe that it's going to happen, usually they can get over it. In a mystical sense, the gate 44 can be all about intuitive smell, so you can smell the spirit world. If you've ever heard of someone talking about the fact that they could smell their grandmother's perfume or something like that, well, that would be something that the gate 44 can do. And another very interesting thing about the gate 44 is it's almost like they can see if somebody's lying, and usually the whole concept of something doesn't smell right is something that will work for these people, so that they can just intuit something that just doesn't feel right or smell right for them. We go through their Saturn like we did before. We're going to look at Saturn in the gate 27 and also in the gate 2. The gate 2 is all about the resources and managing money. 27 is all about caring. This is a very nurturing energy and can be found in people who are in the healing professions and any kind of caring profession. And what's really interesting in this is that if you look at the Saturn, it's got the 27 in the Saturn, but we also have the 27 in the Jupiter. So what that means is the Saturn is talking about how they care and maybe learning the lessons of how you care for people. And the question would be, are you caring too much? Are you smothering someone with your attention? And if that's the case, then Saturn could very well push back. Because the thing about caring is that when we care a lot, we can understand that we really want to help people and we want to do for people and we love people. But on the other hand, the other people may need to have their space and time as well. So when they learn that in the Saturn, of how much caring is the right amount, then they get it in their Jupiter. And that's usually the reciprocation of caring. So they're giving caring and it's coming back to them as well. The other thing that they have in the Saturn is the gate 2, which we talked about, and that's about the resources. And then if you look in the Jupiter, we have the 21, and that's also all about resources. Now they call this the gate of the treasurer, and it's connected to the 45, which is the gate of the queen. And the treasurer is the guy that or girl that takes care of the resources so that there's enough for the winter, and the queen is the one that doles it out. So this can be about control of money, control of resources, and control in general. And so if you look at the gate 2 in Saturn and you're talking about the resources and control of the resources, now if you learn how to control the resources, you'll be given the job as a treasurer, or you will be given the ability to control. And if we look at it in the line 6, that's a role model for control. So it's a role model treasurer energy. And the role model is all about just by being, this person shows how to manage resources and be the best treasurer they can be, theoretically, because they're not actually going to be a treasurer, but the whole concept of managing resources and managing what they have so that everybody gets enough. So that's about all I have to say about this chart, and let's go on to the next chart. And I hope that you enjoyed the presentation and learned some valuable information about how to read a human design chart. So for our last chart, we have a manifesting generator. So this is a different chart than the projector. And a manifesting generator is a generator type. And a manifesting generator is all about responding to opportunities or things that show up in their outer reality. And I have a whole video on manifesting generators if you're interested in finding out more about that. And how we know this person is a manifesting generator is because they have a defined sacral, the square in the center of the chart, the red square, and they also have what's called a motorized throat. In fact, this person has two motors to the throat. They have the root and also the sacral center. And I'll talk a little bit more about the motor that goes to the throat in a few minutes, but let's look at the centers, the undefined and defined centers, and see what's different from the charts we've already looked at. So if we look at the open centers, we notice they have a undefined or open ajna and also a head center. We've already talked about that. And they also have an open will. But what is different is that they have an open solar plexus or emotional center as well as an open identity. So when somebody has an open identity, there could be more fluidity in who they are and what they like to do. This can be a person who likes to do many things instead of just one thing. And for this reason, they may have more of a difficulty trying to figure out their life path or what they want to do with their life. Now, the thing about someone with an open identity is that they don't actually have to always just do one thing, because some people are made to just do one thing. But with somebody with an open identity, it's okay to do a couple of things. But the really important thing with someone with an open identity is to know that there has to be some level of choosing as to what they want to do, because the bottom line is if your energy is dispersed in too many different places, you can't really do a really good job in anything at all. So if you have two or three things that you like to do, or even a career that you have different things that you do in different parts of your life, then that all works. But if it's too many things, then again, it's just too much energy being dispersed and really not enough focus in one spot. The other thing about someone with an open identity is they really need to feel comfortable in their space, because if they don't feel comfortable in their space, their house, the restaurant they go to eat at, then they're not going to have a good experience. And this is extremely important for somebody with an open identity. And usually what happens when they feel uncomfortable is the universe responds in that maybe they go to a restaurant and they sit in a place where they don't feel comfortable and the service isn't amazing or it's not good. So it's really important for somebody with an open identity to be comfortable in their space. And another thing to remember is that having an open identity means that you probably will like to do a lot of different things and try out a lot of different things in your life. And as you get older, you'll be more focused on certain things that you really sort of eventually cling on to. And if you look at this person's open identity, the only thing they have off their identity is one gate, and that's the gate 13. Now, the gate 13 is all about the gate of the listener. So this is a person who can be a magnet for people who want to tell them their life story. And a lot of times people will come up to somebody who has this energy and just start giving their life story, pouring it out of them, even if you don't really know them. And by listening to the stories that people are telling them, someone who holds this energy is acknowledging the importance of these people's stories. And by doing so, they're inadvertently helping the person to be seen and heard for who they are. The will center is open as well, and we've already talked about that. Now, the other thing that's open is the solar plexus or the emotional center. Now, we haven't talked about that either. Just like any center in the human design system, when it's open, it means that the energy is more inconsistent and fluid. This would be considered somebody who is actually an empath. A lot of people will say they're empathic, but somebody with the open solar plexus is truly an empath. So they can feel the energy of the emotions of the people around them. And because of this, somebody with an open emotional center may feel a little uncomfortable around people who have big emotions or who are very emotional. Another thing that can happen with this open center is that the person will collect a lot of emotional energy from those around them. And sometimes people with an open emotional center can be considered quite emotional people. But if given the opportunity to be on their own away from people, they probably have a pretty even temper. So if people who have an open emotional center get home from being out with a lot of people and they're feeling quite overwhelmed, they can lay down for some time, for about a half hour, and release all the energy that they've picked up from the area that they've been in. And one more thing about somebody who has an open emotional center or solar plexus is that when they want to make a decision about something, to buy something new or something like that, they should be making the decision in the moment rather than just waiting, because a lot of times somebody with an open emotional center will have an opportunity and they'll want to just think about it, but that opportunity will go away because somebody who has an open emotional center is meant to make a decision in the now. And if it feels good in the now, that means it's the right decision for them. But oddly, somebody with an open emotional center is someone also who potentially could be someone who likes to wait around and take their time to make decisions when in fact they're supposed to be making right away. Now, if we look at the defined centers, we notice that they have a defined root. We already talked about that. They also have a defined sacral, and that's always the key thing that how we tell if someone is a generator type. So we know this person is a generator type. They also have a defined spleen, which we haven't seen yet, so we'll talk about that, and also a defined throat. But the throat is not just defined, it's also motorized. And how it's motorized is through the 3420, which goes directly to the throat. So if you notice there's a channel, it's kind of like an angled channel that goes directly to the throat. And if you also notice, you can also see that they also have a motor from the root center going from the 54 to the 32, then right into the 57 to the 20, right to the throat. So this person has two motors to the throat. Now, when we talk about a defined spleen, the energy is a little bit more consistent, as in any defined center. So then the energy of the spleen is going to be more consistent, so timing and those kind of things may be less of an issue for this person. But what's also interesting if you look at the spleen is that this person has quite a few fear gates coming out of the spleen. So we talked about the 28 and also the 32. What we didn't talk about was the 57 and also the 48. So when somebody carries a 48, this is called the gate of depth, which is all about somebody who likes to get a lot of information about any given topic. There's a lot of research, study, books, and a person who has a gate 48 is always about trying to learn more because there's this fear that they won't know enough and that they should read one more book or one more research paper about the topic that they're actually studying. But the thing about somebody who carries the 48 energy is generally they're very well prepared and very aware of what they need to know for a topic that they've studied. But unfortunately, because it is a fear gate, that means that they can be held back from actually sharing the information that they've learned because they're really uncertain if they're prepared enough. So the only thing to do with somebody who carries a 48 energy is just to go ahead and sort of do something without having to prepare and worry that you don't have enough information. And usually when they do that, they will realize that they actually have more information than they ever knew they had. The other gate that is a fear gate is the 57, and the 57 is considered one of the most intuitive gates of the human design system. The 57 is somebody who could possibly be fearful of the future and may have anxiety about what's going to come next. They may have some scenarios that they build up in their head about all the bad things that could happen to them, but again, this is another fear gate, which means you have to just push through that fear and know that you're going to be safe and know that you're going to be protected. And just because you think that you're going to be in trouble in the future doesn't always necessarily mean that that's the case. Although anybody with the 57 is quite intuitive, and it's best that they hone their skills so they know exactly what feels right and what doesn't feel right. So after a while, they'll know what's true for them and what's not true for them. So we've already talked about the 4-6 profile, so I'm not going to get into that again, but basically it's a fixed energy, and all three of these people who we've gone over are all people who need to be accepted for who they are, which is kind of interesting how it happened. Now we'll look at the Incarnation cross, which is the right angle cross of Eden. And this is considered the life purpose of somebody who likes to defend the innocent. So if we look at the conscious sun, it's in the 11, and the conscious earth is in the 12, and the unconscious sun is in the 6, and also the unconscious earth is in the 36. The gate 11 is all about ideas and an abundance of ideas. This can be a person who has more ideas than they can ever use in a lifetime. So because of this, the ideas are meant to be shared. The gate 11 is also about peace and also social harmony. What that means is the ideas that this person has could be related to how they could make things easier and better for people and to have more peace in the world. And the gate 12 is about being shy or bold. This is a person who can articulate themselves very well. Some people say that the gate 12 is a mystical gate in that it connects to the angelic realm. There can be artistic expression in the gate 12 as well, and that can come in the form of music, language, and also dance and drama. For anybody who carries a gate 12, there's a need for authenticity in all they do and all other people who interact with them do. So a person who carries a gate 12 may be adverse to anything that's considered fake. And then if you look at the unconscious sun, which is a gate 6. Gate 6 is tribal energy, and that's all about doing what you need to do to protect the tribe. This can be considered a warrior energy. So that's where the whole idea of protecting the innocents comes from. And if you look at the gate 36, that can be about crisis resolution, as well as I talked about it before, the boredom aspect of things. But when we look at it in the terms of in the Incarnation cross, we look at it sort of a little bit deeper than we do if it were in another place in the chart. When somebody has this in their unconscious earth, that could mean that they're unconsciously grounded by crisis situations, and in fact even draw crises towards you. Again, joining in a battle to protect or to avert a crisis or to resolve a crisis situation. If we link this back to the cross of Eden and what that means, so this could be somebody who, through their ideas, their inspired ideas, through the 12, they're fighting for the innocent and averting crises or trying to resolve crises. So eventually they can find the proverbial Garden of Eden where there's peace and harmony in the world. And how that exactly manifests and how that shows up in a person's life is really related to other gates in the chart. Now let's look at the gates of the moon and see how they incorporate into the whole Incarnation cross. When we look at the moon, we can see that the gate 13 is in the moon as well as the gate 14. Now, we already talked about the gate 13 and how that's a magnet for people who will tell their stories. This could be someone who counsels people or somebody who just knows a lot of gossip because everybody's telling them the information. And the other thing that we have is the gate 14, which is all about resources and luck. There's a creative element to the gate 14, but also an ability to see people in their best light. So people who carry the gate 14 can be really good at putting people in the right jobs for what they're best suited for. These can be people who are natural teachers of others just by their example. The law of attraction pretty much begins in the gate 14 because of the inherent luck in it. And this kind of luck can manifest itself in material wealth. And because this person has the gate 14 in the line 3, which is all about experimenting with the energy of the gate 14. This could be somebody who experiments with the way they receive money and how they generate resources. And somebody who carries this energy can sometimes spend more than they receive. So if that's an issue, they may need to get a financial planner. The success that people receive from the gate 14 usually comes from the idea, like I said before, where they're actually working for the betterment of society, the greater good. And when you're a manifesting generator, when you're responding to opportunities or responding to things in your outside world, this is when that lucky horseshoe usually comes into your life. The shadow side of this type of energy is compromise, and that means that you're taking second best just because that's what's available rather than working for what's best for you. But when somebody uses the high side of this energy, it can be very powerful energy. And I talked about the defined sacral and how it's defined through the 3420 and that the channel goes directly to the throat. And anybody who carries this energy is always going to be a manifesting generator, but they also are a very capable work energy type and can do more work than the average person. This is somebody who could be a workaholic who excludes everything from their life except work, and can also be called the channel of power and charisma. The 5720 is the channel that goes directly from the spleen right to the throat. People who have the 5720 defined are people who have intuition in the moment. So what that means is that this person can just blurt out intuitive information or things that will happen in the future without really thinking about it, because there is a direct connection right from the spleen right to the throat. This can be a very powerful and impactful energy. And what's also interesting is that we see the gate 54, and that's featured in 4 different places. So when we see something featured more than once in a chart, that usually means it's a bigger theme in life. And the gate 54 is a marrying maiden and is the opposite gate to the gate 32, which is about ambition. But when you have the gate 54 that connects it and it's a complete channel, it means that you can have big ambitions, but you can also have the ideas on how to bring them into reality and how to manifest them. Now, if we look at the Saturn and also the Jupiter, we can see that in the Saturn, it's the gate 30, and that's a gate of intensity. This is an energy that can be very passionate and intense about certain parts of their life and certain ideas that they have about certain things. Energy is about bringing fantasy into form and holding on to an idea until it can happen in the real world. So if you look at this whole chart, there's a lot of intensity for bringing in things into reality and also persevering, getting through things in order to do it rather than giving up. But when we have the 30 in the Saturn, that means that they have to work with their intensity and their passion so that it's in the best interest of themselves as well as other people. Otherwise, they can burn other people out with their passion. And then if we look at the Jupiter, we have the gift is 28, and the 28 is fighting the good fights and knowing what to fight for rather than just fighting for anything. And so that's a gift for them, as well as the 57, which is all about sharing the intuition. And anything that's in the fifth line is really the epitome or the highest form of the energy. So that's would mean that the 57, the intuition would be in the highest form. And they could make things happen in their life and other people's lives. But the one thing that they need to do in order to make things happen in their lives or other people's is that they need to stick with what they want to do rather than jumping from one thing to another, which the 36 can sometimes do. When somebody who's a manifesting generator or a generator type carries the 36, it is all about sticking it out and mastering something before moving on to something else. And when they do that, they can get the most benefits out of what they've learned in life. So that's everything I have to say about these charts. I hope you enjoyed it and that you learned something, and I will be back again next month. So again, if anybody wants to send their information or details, you can do that at denise.matthew@yahoo.com. But for now, thanks for watching, and I will see you soon.